Hello, I'm Chris Doody, and this is Dr. Michael Doody. We are with Microscopy Research Innovations. Actually, we've rebranded to Sensormed, and so that's what I'm going to be referring to our company as from here on out. Sensormed is a medical device company specializing in surgical solutions for minimally invasive surgical procedures. Minimally invasive surgery is one of the fastest growing trends in medicine today, with over 20 million procedures being performed every year in the U.S. The problem, however, with the majority of these procedures is the initial equipment insertion into the body. This phase of the operation is generally done completely by feel, and so because it's unguided and uncontrolled, it poses a significant risk of complication and injury to the patient. And that's where Sensormed comes in. We've developed a device that can be used in conjunction with existing surgical equipment in order to guide this initial insertion into the body. Our patented radio frequency technology alerts the surgeon as to the exact location of the instrument as it progresses through the anatomy. And so this significantly mitigates the risk associated with these complicated procedures. Now, our device will be used as a competitive alternative to the existing competition in the marketplace, such as CT scan and ultrasound. And this competition is much less effective and much more expensive than our device. And so we can offer a greater benefit for a fraction of the cost. We're currently developing a market-ready product set for market entry in the fourth quarter of 2010. We're going to execute this market entry by developing a direct sales force around the product to support it and introduce it to our user base, which is the physicians. From there, we're going to transition into a distributorship that targets our customers, the hospitals and procurement agencies across the nation. We are self-funded to date as a company, seeking $1 million in investment capital in order to complete the productization, sales, marketing, and FDA approval of our device. And this capital will be used to remain consistent with our 12 to 16-month market entry timeline. Our management team consists of 3 individuals, all of us with unique and extensive experience in the areas of medicine, product development and introduction, and also medical device engineering. And our timeline to exit is 3 to 5 years, at which point we will have gained enough traction and generated enough revenue to become an attractive acquisition prospect for any of the industry-leading medical device companies out there. So that's a little bit about who we are and where we are today, and we'd love to take some of your questions.
Oh, okay. Tell me more about the product. Is it attached to a normal surgical device, or is it use either optical or radio frequencies to localize the tip? How does it work?
I'll take that question. The device employs a very low power microwatt or picowatt radio frequency generator at a set frequency. It basically sends the radio frequency energy down to the tip of the needle, and it monitors the amount that reflects back. As the needle tip advances through the tissues, the amount of reflected energy varies tremendously depending upon the anatomic location. It's extremely low power and should be extremely safe to patients.
Have you calibrated to use with different tissues so you know what tissue you're entering and stuff like that?
That's correct. Each device will be calibrated specifically for the tissue that it's intended for.
And will it work generally with normal obturators, normal equipment?
That's correct, it could.
Okay.
Yeah, and has.
You made a statement that I think you were looking for $1 million, and that was going to take, among other things, that was going to take you to market approval?
Market entry, right. So our timeline for market entry is the end of 2010, and our $1 million will be used to jump the hurdles, the 4 main hurdles to get there, which is the productization or design of the final product, also the sales and marketing piece to support our device and the FDA approval for it.
Anxious to hear more about the regulatory when we have the extended pitch.
Sure.
Yeah, no disrespect to the co-founders up there, but I've heard that surgeons are pretty finicky in their operating rooms. So is there any evidence to support that they will be comfortable with this technology going out there? And then what kind of penetration in the market do you have to get to really have a success with this business? You're talking about a direct sales force, which is quite an endeavor to go after. So I'm curious about that.
Correct.
I'll be talking a little bit more about that in the extended session. Perhaps I can answer it then, but yes, surgeons are very finicky, and I'm one of them. And we tend to be very particular about the things that we adopt. We tend to be very critical. In general, however, we're not addressing operating room surgeons with our initial product. We want to release this to a specific and targeted market, the anesthesiologists for spinal and epidural applications. We think that by introducing it to a limited number of physicians who interact with all of the surgical specialties, we'll be able to get the spread of the technology through other means. Initially, we'll be addressing the anesthesia market.
You made the statement about being able to distinguish between different tissue types as the needle is passing through. So presumably not just solid tissue to in a vessel or in a abdominal cavity or something to that effect. Tell me about whether you've considered an application along the lines of needle biopsies in tumors where you're always in solid tissue, but very critical that you know where you're drawing your biopsy from.
I don't think that this technology will be useful for that.
Okay.
The technology has been applied in human beings. We've done human experimentation with this. And it's able to detect all the different layers of the abdominal wall, for example, as we go through the subcutaneous tissue, the fascia, the muscle or midline, and then the subperitoneum and the peritoneum. These are all distinct enough that I think that when we do see huge changes in signal, up to 100-fold change in signal between the skin and the peritoneal cavity, for example. I do not think or expect that we'll be able to see significant changes in, for example, the tissues of the breast when it encounters a breast tumor or anything like that. This has never been explored, and it would be a subject of research.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Chris, and good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Doody, and I'm a reproductive surgeon from Knoxville, Tennessee. I'm the founder of Sensormed, and I have an MD and a PhD in biochemistry. I've been doing surgery since 1981, and I've done over 9,000 surgical procedures at this point, most of which are best described as minimally invasive procedures. In laparoscopy, which is the procedure I do the most, we gain access to the abdomen through a small incision in the belly button. No matter what we do thereafter inside the body, our biggest risk of unintended and catastrophic injury occurs when we first gain entry into the abdominal cavity with our starter needle. After the needle is placed, we fill the abdomen with CO2 gas, and then from that point forward, we're able to insert our instruments with some degree of safety, and the remainder of the surgery is performed by the surgeon using his judgment and techniques. Several years ago, I began a project to develop the technology to make this part of the surgery safer. The technology that evolved looks at complex impedance, which is basically the reflection of ultra-low power radio frequency energy off the tissue layers of the body. We can therefore locate the position and localize it as it passes forward into the body. And it turns out to be extremely sensitive and specific, and clearly identifies the location, for example, of the main abdominal cavity. With appropriate institutional approval, we have tested this procedure in 100 patients in a formal study. It has corrected my own misperceptions of the placement of the needle in the abdominal cavity on four occasions. We've tested and built a prototype, which is much more complex and all-inclusive than the device that will be produced and mass-marketed. We've obtained a patent that covers the entirety of this technology, and the patent is extremely broad and covers all potential medical uses of this process. We're here to convince the Medclonic Corporation to consider adopting its technology into its product line. I believe that Medclonics is a perfect match. I've been using the products in surgery for almost 3 decades now, and I've witnessed the coming and going of many innovative tools. Medclonics currently has a very stable array of products, all of which are successful. Because they fill important gaps in the existing surgical technology. As a medical device company with an interest in a variety of human conditions, you know that the emphasis in surgical procedures was once upon a time based primarily in enhancing the speed and efficiency of our surgical procedures. Okay, thanks. Our products are first and foremost safety products, and this kind of parallels the current changes and the development of the medical devices that are being developed. The blind and guided insertion of needles and instruments is something that's been ignored by the process of technology and progress of technology. In reality, mistakes and complications do occur, and this is specifically true when needles are inserted into the body during abdominal surgery, arterial catheterization procedures, spinal and epidural anesthesia, chest surgery, and so forth. There's an enormous potential market for devices based upon this technology. Other methods of guiding needle placement are so cumbersome and costly that they're very rarely used. Fluoroscopy, CT scan guidance, ultrasound guidance, and so forth, all are expensive, difficult to use, difficult to import into the operating room. The needle tip technology is to be very low cost, very easy to use for the surgeons and for the people performing procedures. It's best for the patient and best for the surgeon, best for the hospital, and probably best for the third-party carriers.
Let me ask you a
Yes,
question about your device specifically. It sounds like it's going to be a device that fits inside a standard instrument to enter the abdomen. Basically, once you get in there, you withdraw that and use your operative instruments afterward, or use your CO2 to fill up the abdomen, I guess.
Yeah, that's one application. The device will be a disposable device about the size of a small sugar cube, potentially, that can directly attach to a needle, any needle. A needle for placement of intravenous catheters, spinal needle, various needle during laparoscopic surgery, the trocars that are used during arterial access for cardiac catheterization and so forth.
And that will be disposable, I assume.
Correct.
Okay. And the main problem there is, of course, to avoid perforation, that kind of stuff, and getting the needle in the wrong place. And how many complications a year are there from this? How big truly is that market?
Well,
it's
a really big problem, and the majority of the catastrophic complications, for example, in my field of laparoscopy, are indeed at the insertion of the Verries needle. The aorta is about 1.5 inches below the site of insertion of our Verries needle, and injury to the aorta is absolutely catastrophic. Many times the patient's dead before the surgeon can enter into the abdomen and stop the bleeding. The other injuries that can occur are perforation of the bowel, perforation of the bladder, and so forth. Basically, our device tells the surgeon when to stop. The same thing applies in other procedures as well. Spinal and epidural anesthesia is extremely common, and studies with fluoroscopy show that the standard tactile guided procedure of insertion of an epidural is in error 40% of the time. Failed epidurals are extremely common, and there are enough women in this audience that we would probably have at least several women who've had failed epidurals during childbirth. This is the kind of thing that is begging for technology. Basically, insertion of needles is based on the haptic sense, the sense of the procedure performer, the surgeon or the nurse or whoever is doing the procedure, as the needle is advanced through various body tissues. By monitoring the complex impedance of radiofrequency energy as this needle advances through the tissues, we can then provide an auditory feedback to the procedure performer so that essentially an additional sense is added to the process.
How much training does it take for a surgeon to use this?
Well, essentially none. All surgeons who perform these kind of procedures are already trained in the manual and haptics insertion of the needle. So this was simply an add-on to what they're already experiencing.
So if you can hear a beep, it's fine, right?
Yeah, basically. Okay. The prototype I used in surgery actually was programmed with piano tunes through MIDI, and we would hear the different notes as we progressed through the body tissues. And finally, when I got to a very low pitch, it was characteristic of the peritoneum, I knew to stop. And again, 4 times I was wrong. My sense of where I was completely contradicted by the device, and it was right.
I'd like to dig into the intellectual property for just a moment. You described a broad patent, I presume an issued patent there. So how broad? Are you protecting all uses of RF for needle guidance?
No, not all uses of RF, but all uses of impedance monitoring of guidance for insertion of needles and instruments into the body cavity, into any body cavity, any anatomic cavity. Is extremely broad.
And it is issued or pending?
It's issued.
You mentioned the prototype was more complex than what the
That's
ultimate
correct.
product. Can you explain why it is more complex and how do you anticipate you're going to be able to simplify the end product?
The initial device was used to collect information, and it was a computerized device which was built in collaboration with an electronics engineer. It swept through an entire spectrum of frequencies from 5 to 110 megahertz. We looked at multiple impedance parameters. Phase impedance is built up of several different components. We were able to measure all of these thousands of times per second and collect huge masses of data on each patient. We don't need anything like that. Basically, the initial studies were able to show us what frequencies to use, for example, with the abdominal cavity. And we were able then to take that information. The actual device itself will be very simple. A simple transmitter, very low power, and some devices basically from cell phone technology that enable us to look at the reflected power.
Okay. You show this slide that's up right now. I assume that the status quo is the greatest percentage of what's used in most minimally invasive surgeries. Is that correct, or procedures?
Right.
And it seems to me that your approach, the biggest competitor is probably the status quo. And I think it would be really helpful to understand for the sales force what the costs that they're going up against, right? Because you're suggesting you have a cost, and there's
Correct.
no question that there's probably some hidden costs. Is there any way to quantify the cost of status quo with yours so that you can have sales forces out there talking to people on that on a regular basis?
It's very difficult to quantitate the cost of a failed epidural. It might involve a C-section, it might not. It might involve general anesthesia, it might not. So it's very difficult to put numbers on this kind of thing. It's basically built, our sales model is going to be built upon the dissatisfaction of surgeons and anesthesiologists with the current status quo. As mentioned, the placement of spinal needles is incorrect 40% of the time. The placement of epidural needles is incorrect 40% of the time, and that is associated frequently with failure. That kind of quantitation can be done, and we can look, for example, at the subsequent costs of such errors. Again, the costs are primarily hidden. You don't see them until you do a fuller analysis, which we've not done.
How will you approach early adopters?
Well, initially we're going to be going again after the anesthesia market. We're going to be looking at, we're going to be doing our human testing for the FDA at the University of Tennessee with the anesthesia folks. We're hopefully going for academic publications from there. And then once we have a product, we can then approach individual anesthesia departments and anesthesiologists with a sales force and get the product going.
Let me return to my earlier regulatory question. So to get through any regulatory hurdles, plus all the other stuff you have to do for $1 million, have you had the conversations with FDA to verify that there are minimal or no hurdles, and can you tell us where those discussions are?
No, we've done
what your assumptions are.
We've done the diligence in terms of reading regulations and so forth. Because of the fact that this is such a low picowatt quantities of energy that are used here, and it's essentially simply attached to an existing needle as it's used in reality now. We don't think that the FDA will be at all concerned about potential safety hazards. We're going to be primarily focused on showing the efficacy in the individual products as they come up for market.
Is there an existing CPT for this yet?
No. Well, there are existing CPTs, for example, for laparoscopy, for spinal anesthesia, for this, and so forth. But of course, nothing along the lines of a CPT code for radiofrequency assisted epidural placement.